of Sebastopol sunrise, and everybody's got it. Recording is in process. February 9th, if you can believe it, we're building community and starting recording. Patrick.
Hello. My friends and fellow Rotarians, will you join me in the pledge? Thank you. I pledge allegiance to the
United States of America,
the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Joe, are you on? You know, I hadn't heard Joe yet. Well, who would like to lead us in a song?
Bill.
Bill.
All right. There's a bright
Haze on the haze on the mountain. There's a bright haze on the meadow. The corn is as high as an elbow high,
and it looks like it's climbing up to the sky. Oh, what a beautiful morning.
Oh, what a beautiful day.
I've got a beautiful feeling. Everything
going my way. Wow, there's a reason to go back to in person. But thank you very much, Bill. That was lovely. That was quite lovely, and it's good. It sounds like everybody knows the song. Henry Alker, I think, slept in. Good for him, or didn't pick up that email. But we had numerous greeters, and as I said as we started, and I'm sure that there are many, that part that we socialize before the meeting starts is truly my favorite part of the meeting. So thank you all for that. Diana Curtis, a thought for today.
Yes, I have one from Pearl Buck. She was the first American woman to win a Nobel Prize for literature. And she also got a Pulitzer. So she said, the test of a civilization is in the way that it cares for its helpless members.
Amen.
That's my thought.
Where are we?
Definitely a civilized thing to say. So visitors, guests, and Zoom participants, I don't know how many people got a chance to see that Dale Ann Knight is in the room. Dale Ann comes to us from Tlaquepaque, where she has moved. She was living in Roanoke Park and was a member of the Roanoke Park Katati Club, has led numerous Festival of Brotherhood events to there, travels to Uganda, travels the world, was Rotarian of the Year, and actually in my mind probably is Rotarian of the Year every year. Now president of a club in Tlaquepaque, a club that speaks Spanish, and Dale is working on her Spanish even through this pandemic. Quite a person. I look forward to all of us jumping on a bus and going down there and visiting Dale. Won't it be nice, Dale? Now, you said you have a lot of room for us to sleep out on your veranda, right?
Well, David, it's a direct flight from San Francisco to Guadalajara, and I do have a bedroom for guests with its own bathroom, and some people could sleep out on the terrace, but you'd be happier at the Hotel Quinta Don Jose, which Northern Californian Rotarians have loved with Festival of Brotherhood.
Yeah, fabulous place. So anyway, Dale's gonna give us a little bit of chatting. So it is now time to mute the crowd in general, and let me see if I can unmute myself. There we go. There's so much to this. Hide the meeting controls again. There we go. Thank you to those of us who have logged on and have put in their $10 per meeting. That was 40 for January. And we will have 4 Wednesdays here in February. So you can go on, pop in there to that member payment thing that's up on the main page, put in your amount. And if you feel especially generous, pop in a couple of dollars to cover the cost of your credit card, because that's a great way to go. And thank you again for folk who do that. Guess whose birthday it is today? Oh, well, coming up. It's her birthday every day. Susan Mark Raymond celebrating her 12th and trying to forget who she married. You know, she doesn't complain very much is what I'll say about her. So, Wayne Britton, are you on?
I'm here.
Yes.
There you are. You wanted,
Yeah.
your computer unceremoniously unplugged itself last time and went dead, and you had a few more things you wanted to say. This is it.
Yes, to unmute. Big Wayne.
Unmute.
Can't hear you, Wayne.
Unchew.
Okay, I've got the space bar down. Am I not unmuted?
You're doing
We can hear
fine.
you now, Bubba.
Okay, now I got I got to navigate here to a page. So just a second here. I got a list of folks now. Yeah, sorry about last week. So over the years that I've worked with the youth, I've had a lot of friends from the club and friends outside the club that have helped, and so I'm happy to have this opportunity to thank some of those people. And I've got a list, so I'm going to go through it and mention what we worked with. So Bill Sauber was kind of the leader in getting the money raised for the greenhouse over at Laguna. So thank you, Bill, very much. We did a CNC router project for the school. And 2 of my buddies from Sebastopol makers, Mark Jackson and Bruce Matson, who maybe some of you know, helped. Bruce does a lot of work, has helped at the Christmas dinner in the past, I know. So we did a Brookhaven makers class also. And on loan from Barbara Barney was Steve Barney, and he and I built a bunch of chairs and tables, which I think you might have seen a slide of last week. And also Mark Jackson was helpful in that. Mark is an artist who does a lot of computer art, that sort of thing. So he's been very helpful. Student of the month, student of the year, of course, Bob Keyser has been working on that over the years, and we've worked together on that. Bruce and Elaine Campbell do this student of the year. At Interact, Bob Keyser, Louis Hoffer worked on it in the past, and I know Bob's still working on it, and I think a few other folks are doing it this year, and maybe you mentioned it, but I've forgotten who it was. RILA, we did a RILA program at least 1 year, and I know Michael McLaughlin volunteered to do some cooking for those folks and round up the food and take it out to the camp where the students met. And then the electronics teaching module that we did for Laguna, Barbara Barney was very helpful with that. And Joe Maloney, who was a teacher at Laguna, allowed me to teach a few classes, and I'm grateful for that. It was fun. The shop cleanup at Laguna recently, Rod McCauley and I and 2 other folks from the Garden Club, Henning Jewell and Dave Berg, were very helpful. Vocation talks. Carmelina Grant was the Annalee counselor that helped arrange that, and a couple of our members, Brian Bauer and Matt Whitman. Thank you guys. Peace pole, Jim Glom. We made the first peace pole that went outside of Screaming Mimi's, which was done with the CNC router at Laguna High School. The makers class at Annalee, Casey Shea really started that class, and he's going to be a speaker coming up, and he's a really a great guy, and he's not a member of the club, but he is works with the county on makers classes, teaching other teachers how to do it. So also at Annalee, the makers class, Walt Hayes, and again, Mark Jackson, and we've worked with some of the students from Laguna there. We took them over to the makers class at Annalee, and a couple of students worked on building a kind of a little cart. And we also did one of the displays for the Apple Blossom Parade. If you remember the big pumpkin, a couple of the kids helped weld that up. I think there was a slide last week of one of the kids who got a Student of the Month, and he ended up wanting to become a welder. So I thought that was pretty neat that he learned that from doing that project. Cool Kids Camp, Barbara Barney. Video contests. We did a number of video contests and speech contests in the past.
Your finger must have fallen off the space bar there, Wayne.
When you're on mute.
Wayne?
Uh-oh.
Wayne? There you go. No?
So nobody went down there and unplugged his computer again, did they?
Just the microphone function.
Well, until he comes back, the Interact Club is doing the Redwood Empire Food Bank today at 5 o'clock.
And this week, I think I'm back. Hopefully I'm back. I don't know why it quit working, but I did release the space bar briefly, but then when I went back, it didn't function. So I don't know what's going on. Anyhow, we did a career day a few years ago. David Mark Raymond, Al Lustig, Jeff Dunbar, Brian Bauer, and Dave New all participated in that. Dave New is a kind of an honorary member of our club, and he used to help out at Cajun a lot. I don't know if you guys remember Dave. The student exchange, I know David Mark Raymond and Michael Fells are involved in that. And please, David, add to that, because I know there are other folks that are
EJ. Yeah.
Okay.
We're the threesome. And of course, you know, we always have to give tribute to Lou, who was a mainstay in that program.
Okay. Thank you. And two more to go. The Grayton Labor Center, Brian Bauer and myself worked on helping that, get that together. We put up a sign and did some other work on that project. And then with Brad Smith at Laguna, who's one of the teachers there, we did a solar project and put up a solar panel and set up that. And I'm sure there's many other folks who have helped that I've forgotten. I apologize for that, but I have a bad memory. So appreciate all your help. Thank you guys so much for the opportunity to do all this stuff.
Fabulous leadership, Wayne. Thank you so much for all that you do for us and the leadership you give. And isn't that gratifying to see how much we do? I love seeing it all put together. So, Natalie McNamara, Sebastopol Living.
Here's the real me. Hi, everybody. Am I muted?
No, we hear you.
We can hear you.
Hi, great. Good morning, everyone. I didn't realize I just got up. Thank you for the opportunity to talk about the publication to the club. David asked me to give everybody a little bit of a brief synopsis of what I do, because it has had some of our members on the cover, and a lot of our members have also sponsored the magazine. So what makes Sebastopol so special? And it's our people. So from our legendary groundbreaking farmers and growers like Luther Burbank to start, to the artists and entrepreneurs of today, Sebastopol's diverse community of multi-generational families are what make it fertile ground for living well and prospering. So why I do this is each month, Sebastopol Living brings the community together by delivering to the doorsteps of West County residents a unique social media networking magazine that exclusively features the people of Sebastopol. And here you'll see Jay Turgell and her children. She was our February cover. And we bring people together. So we reach overall with digital more than 22,000 West County residents. Our readers learn about our local influencers, artists, and entrepreneurs. We discover a unique and trusted businesses into the community. And our readers can find new and established local businesses. So we have in-depth reporting in the back with our local sports calendars, family events, and countywide events. And that would be Loretta Castleberry and Chip Castleberry, who I'm sure many of you know or have heard of in the community. They're a wonderful couple that have done so much for Annalee High School. In addition, they're very, very dialed into the athletics. The track or the field at Annalee is called Castleberry Field. So that's why the magazine goes out. It's not, you won't find it on street corners or in coffee houses. It really is mailed to bring the community together so the neighbors can read about the neighbors, and that's what makes it popular and growing. So I want to thank my sponsors who've been a part of it and continue to be a part of it. I really couldn't have done it. There's many of them in our Rotary Club. And it's always been, we've had a great 5 years, actually in July, it'll be 5 years of bringing the community together. So thank you everybody for your support and for your covers. I found some great stories in our club itself. And if there's anything you would like me to report or cover for the community, especially in our youth section, Wayne, please feed me it's called a data feed. Feed the data here. We would love to print it in the magazine. Use the magazine as a resource for the community. We have a community page that's dedicated for that. And the purpose is for it to be by the people, of the people, and for the people of Sebastopol.
Fabulous.
All I got.
I know a bunch of us look forward to it every month. And certainly we can subscribe if we wish. This is correct?
Yeah, if you don't get the magazine, just email me and I'll get you on the list.
Cool, thank you. Jerry, start us off.
Yes, well, this is Okwalagabo. It is a farm, a demonstration farm in Uganda, and we have supported it. And I think Dale and Barbara are going to talk a little more about it.
Yeah, I'll talk a little bit about it. This sign started when we did a multi-club district grant to develop this training farm. And I visited it, and I think it was 2017. Now we've kind of come full circle here, because when I visited, they gave me 2 chickens as a gift as a thank you. And it's too bad we don't have, there are other pictures, but we don't have time for that. Because the training farm, we started out with good breeding goats, and then we had composting, better farming techniques. These are subsistence farmers. They have no machines. So this year, when Dale went to visit Uganda last fall, Dale, take it away. Unmute, Dale.
I was in Uganda twice in 2021. I was there in May, shortly after our very dear friend Helen Opio had passed away. Helen and her son Silas are from Okwalagabo, and they started the Rotary Community Corps there. So the community is organized to work together. And what they had decided they wanted to do was, as subsistence farmers, they only receive cash when they sell their crop. So they wanted a way to have income more regularly. So the donation from Sebastopol, Sunrise, and Barbara in October has gone to buy and raise an improved breed of chickens. And as you can see from the photo, the community has received the chickens. This will enable them to continue to breed chickens, and northern chickens receive a higher price at the market in Kampala. So they can sell 2 or 3 chickens every month and have cash income. Because of the work of Helen and Fred Doy, who's their ag advisor and also now a member of Rotary, they have a very strong, organized community to do these projects, and they are looking at being a model for other communities nearby.
And this is, we have more than one relationship in this area, don't we?
There are a lot of relationships in northern Uganda. There's the relationships here out with Okwalagabo outside of Lira. We have relationships with Soroti Central. We have relationships with Rotarians with the Rotary Club of Tororo. The literacy matching grant was approved by Rotary Foundation. Textbooks should be arriving, if not this week, next week. Desks arrive the following week because all the desks have to be made. Students in Uganda have been out of school for 2 years. They just started back in January. So when I do a full presentation, I'll talk more about the biggest crisis, which is teen pregnancy right now.
Yeah.
Hey, Jerry,
Yeah,
can you tell us?
well, let me add also, at the beginning of the pandemic, we got a request for help to buy some food for the people in the area around Okwalagabo. And our club generously provided money to buy some staple food items for the group there. What we're looking at here is a group of students at Iluya School in Bukoba, Tanzania. And just about a week or 2 ago, I got a text from the headmistress, who was quite excited about the fact that the students passed with very good grades, much better than they had been doing before. And she attributed it to the sanitation, water, and hygiene project that our club was the lead sponsor on a global grant. So thank you, club, for supporting this. And these are the happy kids that are going to advance on with their education now because of the grant that we did.
Wow, that changes lives, doesn't it? So thank you 3 for presenting, and also thank you all 3 for your work there. This is so impressive. Speaking of impressive, Joe's still sleeping this event off, but y'all went out to the coast, huh? And
well, it was just simply a spectacular time out there. The fog came in and out, and as it went out, the landscape sparkled with sunlight and greenery and rock and a very calm sea. And then when the fog came in, it was sort of mysterious and really a great time out there. So Yeah, thanks.
So somebody who wants to join that, how do they find out where you're going to go? So, somebody who says, well, kind of terrain like that I can do. I don't want to go up and down hills. How would that work?
Well, I think Joe's been kind of taking the lead, and there's been sometimes when we meet at 7:30 in the morning on Monday at Hot Monk, the decision is made at that time where to go.
Got it.
2 weeks previous, it was at the Laguna. Dewey Watson led a couple of walks that was over in the Camp Meeker area, which was fabulous. We got to get on Bishop's Ranch property up in Healdsburg. That was spectacular. So the thing of it is that I'm tired of seeing just dudes on this walk, and I know some women walk. So if there's any that are so inclined, don't be afraid. We don't speak ill and badly. So come along for a walk, and you'd be pleasantly surprised, like I am, how wonderful it is all the time.
And we've been talking about Sugarloaf State Park next week.
Ooh, nice.
Yeah. And I think there'll be a return visit to this coastline to go not west, you can't go very far, but to go east to Redwood Hill. And it's right across from Shell Beach. It goes through some beautiful redwoods and a spectacular view at the top.
Sounds great. Lovely time. And Bob Keyser earlier was saying, I think that may be my favorite part of the meeting is the walks we take on Mondays. So we have a lot to be grateful for and to live for, and being grateful that we are who we are, and recognizing that other people might need support, and some of the kindness that the world has visited with us can be spread forward through the Rotary Foundation or our club foundation, or just being totally Rotarian and committing to acts of kindness as often as you can. So please do be generous, and thank you. Add these to your calendar. There it is, 7:30 every Monday hiking, every Monday, a hiking social. Get it to Hop Monk by 8:30, no later. Watch out, those guys take off. And on the 12th,
we need to update that, David. We take off at 7:30. So be there before 7:30.
It was too early for me to change it. I can't change that to 8:30 to 7:30, but 7:30 is when it is, eh? Yeah, sorry about that. So 7:30, get on up there and get out. It's good for you. February 12th, this weekend, District Foundation Seminar. I'm going to be presenting about endowment and major gifts, and other folk are giving resources and information. It's a nice, tight little 2-hour thing. We are rehearsing so that we won't be fumbling around. And I think it's going to be a very good presentation and gives you a lot of information about how you can learn more. February the 15th, 5:30 to 6:30, membership with Kathy Rogers. And on the 21st, board meeting. Everybody is invited. I think everybody in the club will be happy to know that either at that meeting or prior, the board's going to talk about when we can set the date to go back into hybrid and in-person meeting so that we can get ourselves set, let our caterer know, and get ourselves rolling. February 23rd, I believe, is when International Committee meeting is going to happen. Michael Cook will be chairing that. I didn't put the time in there, but it's immediately following this meeting. And February 24th, 2 o'clock to 4 o'clock, Redwood Empire Food Bank. So reach out to Dan Needham. He gets you signed up, and you are supposed to register before you go. Any announcements for the good of the order? Ooh. Let's move forward. Next week's program presenter is JP Sahi, CEO of Rotacare, free clinics in the Bay Area. Just brief on this, but show up next week and you'll get the skinny on very good Rotary started and Rotary supported stuff. And this week's presenter is Kristen Aquilino. Jerry?
Hey, good morning. I had the pleasure of having a tour with Kristen a year or 2 or 3 or 4 ago at the at the Marine Lab. Anyway, fascinating project that she has. You can see here, she is a lead scientist for the white abalone captive breeding program. And rather than just have me read all of this, she is spectacular in the work that she's doing and has actually been a recipient of NOAA's Species in the Spotlight Hero Award. So let's hear it for our hero, Dr. Kristen Aquilino.
Thanks, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here, and thanks so much for the invitation, Jerry. Yes, it was a long time ago, pre-pandemic, when we were together in the Marine Lab, which feels both forever ago and kind of like yesterday as well, in some ways. I'm throwing up my presentation here. And so, as Jerry said, I work at Bodega Marine Lab. I work for UC Davis. Bodega Marine Lab is part of UC Davis. And I also work for California Sea Grant. I'm an extension specialist for California Sea Grant, and I direct the white abalone captive breeding program for NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. And so that's mostly what I'm going to talk about today. But I actually did join your group in August of 2014, which also seems like yesterday and forever ago. I remember 2 things from that visit. I remember having a delightful time talking to all of you. And I also remember being very nauseous because I was pregnant with my first child. And so I'm happy to say today I'm feeling much better than I did the last time I presented. And last time I gave a talk, mostly just an overview of Bodega Marine Lab. So we're out on the coast, not far from where that hiking group that Jerry led was walking the other day. We are out on Bodega Head. When we don't have COVID going on, we have public tours open on Fridays from 2 to 4. And we are really hopeful that someday soon we might be able to start those again, because we'd love to have all of you out there. But for now, we are still close to the public, and we have limited access even for our staff. We do a lot of work at Bodega Marine Lab on ecology, on oceanography, reproduction and development of lots of different critters, and climate change, as well as paleobiology and many other subjects. It's a really happening place research-wise. Like I said, today I'm going to talk about abalone. Show of hands, how many of you have eaten an abalone before? Many of you. They're quite delicious. How many of you have dove for abalone before? Some of you, yes. So it's going to be really fun to dive for abalone. There are 7 species of abalone on the west coast of North America, and they're listed here. These are their north to south distributions. And many of them occur right around Sonoma County. And as many of you who have interacted with these animals, they're really important culturally, economically, and ecologically as well. So they have been used for thousands of years as sustenance, as jewelry and in ceremony, and as currency. The shells have been used as currency in some cases. They're a part of origin stories. They've been a really important part of indigenous and immigrant communities in what is now the United States. And there's been commercial fisheries centered around abalone that have been really lucrative, as well as recreational fisheries and really sustainable aquaculture farms that are thriving in California today. And they're really important ecologically. I like to call them the Zambonis of the seafloor. So for those of you who have been watching the Olympics and the ice skating that's going on in between the competitions, the Zamboni goes down and makes the ice nice and smooth. That's kind of what the abalone do. They graze the bottom of the ocean, and they open up space for this really important algal species called encrusting coral and algae. So this picture here of this abalone in the wild, we can just see the fringe of the foot sticking up and the respiratory pores on top that they respire through. You see a little bit of pink around there. That pink algae is kind of like a landing pad for lots of animals in the ocean to settle on. So lots of animals in the ocean are broadcast spawners. They send their eggs and sperm into the water column. Those eggs and sperm can combine and form an embryo, which develops into a larvae that usually swims around in the ocean for anywhere from a few days to a few months. and it has to find a place to settle at the end of that. So this pink algae is really important for that, and abalone help maintain that. And as we know, on the north coast of California right now, we're having a lot of challenges because everything is out of balance. The kelp died off during some warm water events, urchins bloomed. There are very few abalone in the system right now, and abalone are a really important player in kelp forest ecosystems because they help keep everything in balance. So what about this white abalone? I mentioned there's been a lot of fishing of abalone in California. This graph here on the right has the commercial fishing landings of abalone when the commercial fishery was open. So the vertical axis here is tons of abalone collected or harvested, and the horizontal axis is year. So it goes from 1942 until 1996. The top panel here is the total landings of all species, all 7 species of abalone that were collected. And you can see that the majority of them were collected from the 1950s through the 1960s. If you break it down by species, though, the next panel is red abalone. Those were kind of the first to be harvested. Oops, the panel after that is pink abalone. Those were harvested next, then greens, then blacks, and finally white abalone. And so one of the things that fisheries managers learned through this is that you really have to pay attention to which species is being fished, not just the overall take. California Department of Fish and Game at the time was just counting the total number of abalone harvested and not necessarily noticing that there was this serial depletion of different species happening. And of the harvest, white abalone down here at the bottom, you can see the scale bar is completely different from the other ones. It's much smaller. There weren't a lot collected. Unfortunately, there weren't a lot to begin with. So in just about 10 years in the 1970s, we harvested 99% of white abalone in the ocean. So this is a pie chart with the white here representing the total commercial landings of 280 metric tons. And this little black sliver is what we think is left, fewer than 2 metric tons. We took almost all of them. And as I mentioned before, abalone are broadcast spawners. They send their eggs and sperm into the water column to reproduce, which means they're also really terrible at long distance relationships. If they're more than a meter or 2 apart from one another and they're spawning, those eggs and sperm aren't going to find each other. And so there's so few abalone, white abalone left in the wild that they are so far apart from one another, but they can't reproduce anymore. And they probably haven't reproduced successfully very much since the 1960s. We think they only tend to live about 35 to 40 years. So they're really, really on the brink. And that's why they're one of NOAA's species in the spotlight, one of the species that NOAA believes is most likely to go to extinct very soon without our help. And they became the very first marine invertebrate to be federally listed as endangered in 2001. At the time, we thought they would be relatively easy to save. Not only are there white abalone on our coast, not only are there abalone on every continent except for Antarctica, there are also abalone farms on every continent except for Antarctica. So this top panel here shows an abalone farm that's in Goleta, just north of Santa Barbara, that produces tons of abalone annually. We know how to make lots of abalone. So we thought in 2001, when these animals were first listed, that we'd be able to create a lot of them. And then the tough part might be to figure out how to put them back out in the wild successfully. So that's what this bottom panel shows, maybe some ways that we can get them out in the wild. But it should be a relatively easy process. And that's how things started. So in the year 2000, some scientists collected about 20 adult white abalone from the remnant population in the wild, brought them into captivity and spawned them, and created over 100,000 juveniles, which compared to the couple thousand white abalone left in the ocean seemed like a huge victory. Unfortunately, when those animals are about a year old, 95% of them died from disease. This disease is called withering syndrome. It's caused by a bacterium that affects the esophagus of the abalone. And it's really interesting because it's temperature dependent. So the abalone can have the bacterium, they can be apparently asymptomatic, but when the water gets warm, the bacteria proliferate, the abalone digests its foot muscle and falls off the rock and dies in the ocean or off the tank in an aquaculture facility. So this top abalone foot here, this is a red abalone, is a healthy red abalone. And this one on the bottom is one that's suffering from withering syndrome. You can see that its foot no longer takes up the full area of its shell. And we knew at the time that withering syndrome existed. We knew that it was a big problem for black abalone in the wild, which is the shallowest of all of the abalone species in California. Water gets really warm in shallow waters, or can get warm in shallow waters during El Nino events and other kinds of warm water events. But we didn't know it impacted white abalone, which is the deepest of all of our California species, until we brought it into an on-land facility and the water got warm. And unfortunately, at the time, there wasn't much anyone could do about it. So for a number of years, the program really languished. The abalone weren't able to, they weren't surviving well. No one was able to breed them. And in 2011, the program moved to Bodega Marine Laboratory, partly because of our really clean, nutrient-rich seawater up here. We have a lot of expertise in invertebrate development and reproduction, a lot of expertise in outplanting of abalone and ecology of abalone. And we also at Bodega Marine Lab house the state's Shellfish Health Laboratory. This is a lab that is run by the California Department of Fish and Wildlife, and had a person there at the time named Jim Moore, who was instrumental in identifying and tracking and learning to treat this disease. He and his colleagues actually developed an antibiotic bath treatment. You could put the abalone in this bath, it rid them of the bacteria that caused the disease, and they were healthy. And then they could, spawn and do all the things that we needed them to do. The other thing that Jim and his colleagues developed was a shell waxing treatment. So when these animals are in the wild, they look like Muppets. They are completely covered with sponges and worms and clams and all sorts of things that can bore into their shells and open up space for disease or make that shell brittle, which is a problem if we want to handle them. And so Jim and his colleagues developed this waxing treatment. It's a combination of organic coconut oil and organic beeswax. It smells lovely. And we paint it on their shells about twice a year, and it suffocates any of those boring organisms that are in those shells. So now that we had healthy animals, we could actually start to increase the captive population again with hopes of putting some of them in the wild. So this isn't just a program at Bodega Marine Laboratory. We are the heart of it, and we hold the permit for all of this work, but it's a huge collaboration, an international collaboration through US and Mexico. And there are a dozen facilities that hold white abalone, and they include universities, they include state agencies, federal agencies, aquariums, and aquaculture farms. And we've had great success in the past decade. So I joined this program in 2011 as a postdoc and took over as director a few years later. When I started, we only had a couple of dozen adult white abalone in captivity. And now we have generally 20 to 30,000 white abalone in captivity at any given time. So this graph is on the vertical axis, the number of year-old white abalone produced. So getting them to that year-old is a good metric of how many are going to survive longer. And the horizontal axis is year, and we really increased production quite rapidly. We had lower production in the past year or so, and we attribute this partially to the pandemic because we haven't been able to be in the lab quite as much taking care of these animals, but we're hoping that we can get that to bump up again in our spawns that are coming up this year. And the background photo here is this really amazing photograph. This is a respiratory pore, or the hole on the top of an abalone shell. Oops, this is a tentacle coming out of that hole. And these are eggs being spawned by this female abalone. So my job as a scientist is to try to figure out how to make more of these animals. And I focus basically on four main areas. One is reproductive conditioning, how to get these animals to spawn more in captivity. One is post-settlement survival. So I mentioned that to reproduce, they not only have to spawn these eggs and sperm and create an embryo, that embryo has to go through this really energetically costly metamorphosis to go from something that swims in the plankton to something that crawls like a snail. We expect a lot of mortality naturally during that transition, and so getting them to survive better through that is really important. We're worried about genetics. We have a very small number of broodstock, number of animals that we've collected from the wild because there's so few left in the remnant population. And we want to make sure that we're not just breeding siblings and half siblings all the time. So how can we maintain genetic integrity of the population to save the species? And we're worried about climate change. These animals are going to be outplanted in an ocean that's very different from the ones that their parents and grandparents lived in. So how can we best prepare them for that? So that way the population can persist throughout time. And we're getting really we're getting better at putting them in the wild, which is really exciting. In 2019, just before the pandemic started, we were able to put our very first batch of white abalone into the wild. It was a really historic moment. And there's a few organizations that are working carefully to do this, to try to figure out the best way to do it. What is the best location, the best size to outplant them, the best time of year, the best methods. The California Department of Fish and Wildlife created these baby abalone recruitment traps, which are modified lobster traps with broken up cinder blocks inside that make nice interstitial habitat for the abalone. And that's what they are using to outplant white abalone. The Bay Foundation and National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration created these short-term abalone fixed enclosures or safes that are like these traps that abalone can't get out of even for a week or two. And they hand feed kelp to them while they're trapped in there, and then pop them open. So that way, pop the traps open. So that way the abalone can get out after they've acclimatized for a little while. So trying to figure out the best method for this. And we've had some great success so far. So we're seeing still returns on abalone that we outplanted in 2019. We've now outplanted thousands of white abalone into the wild, and we're really excited about how that process is going. So the main things that I want to impart on this group is that white abalone are culturally, economically, and ecologically important. That people throughout history have connected really strongly to abalone. And these animals in particular will go extinct without our help. Our captive breeding efforts are essential for bringing them back from the brink of extinction. We do have the tools to save them, and really they should be relatively easy to save. That we know how to make lots of abalone, we've figured out this disease issue, and so we just need to, at this point, scale up and learn how to do it even better. And then all of these things that we're learning about saving this endangered species also relate to a lot of other environmental challenges that we are facing. We are able through this work to make sure that commercial aquaculture for abalone and other species is more sustainable. We are able to help inform the restoration and management of other species such as red abalone on the North Coast. And this work is really all encompassing of those things. So like I said at the beginning, I really wish that instead of talking to you here, I could talk to you in the middle of my lab and show you a white abalone and take a selfie with all of you. Here's some pictures of some selfies I've taken with Janet Napolitano, who's the former president of University of California. The middle panel is Catherine D. Sullivan, the first American woman to walk in space. So an astronaut has been to my lab, and she used to be the head of the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. And then on the right is the current chancellor of UC Davis, Gary May. But in lieu of being able to actually take you to my lab, we are on social media, both me and White Abalone, on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. If any of you have jumped into TikTok yet. And so you're welcome to follow us there and see more about what we are doing. And I'm very, very happy to take any questions you might have.
Hi, fascinating. Thank you for your work. It's a major effort to try and save a species on this earth, especially the way things are going. Is climate change affecting at all your efforts in pushing these white abalone out into the ocean?
There's a few things about regarding climate change that we're most concerned about. One is temperature, and whether or not be the total sea surface temperature changing or having more of these what we call marine heat waves. In 2013 and 2014, we had this warm water blob, and some of you may have heard about that. It really killed off a lot of the kelp in Northern California. That was followed by an El Nino event. We think these marine heat waves are going to become more common as the climate continues to change. And that is concerning both because of the potential loss of kelp, which is what abalone eat. It's their main food source and their main habitat, and also because of this disease. Now, the good news with the disease is that in the past 5 years, we've actually discovered a bacteriophage or a virus that attacks the bacterium that causes withering syndrome. And for many species, it's conferring resistance to the disease. So we have this water and Normally the abalone farms would just be decimated by that kind of warm water, and they saw no mortality at all. So that's really good news for most species. White abalone doesn't seem to have the same kind of conferred resistance from the bacterium or from the virus, but there's good news. We're also concerned about ocean acidification. We know that the ocean is becoming more acidified because of the CO2 in the atmosphere. The ocean is like a giant sponge and soaks up a third or so of that CO2 that humans have emitted. And that slightly more acidic ocean means that it's harder for especially small animals that have a shell to find the building blocks to create that shell. And then it's harder for them to keep it there because of the changing chemistry of the ocean. So those are kind of the two main things that we're most worried about. And we're trying to find spaces for outplanting that are the temperature regime, at least for now, is a happy medium for where we think that these animals will thrive. But ocean acidification is something that is less predictable at this point. And the thing we're trying to do to combat that is try to understand more if there are certain lineages of abalone or certain genes that might be more resilient to climate change, to see if we can breed certain animals to be ready for it.
Wow.
Could I comment on the acidification?
Yeah.
I know that I've read that they believe that oysters in some locales are affected by that because basically the acid dissolves the shells of these creatures. And I guess being a larger animal, I don't know whether that affects them or they have a different mechanism or whatever, but I think they're mostly calcium carbonate, aren't they, the shells?
Exactly, yeah. So most of these mollusks in the ocean have calcium carbonate shells. And so far what we understand is that they are particularly vulnerable when they first start creating those shells. I mentioned white abalone, they spawn, they create an embryo. The embryo sinks to the bottom of the ocean for about 24 hours, and then a swimming larvae hatches out. When that larvae is about a day or two old, it creates its very first shell. And they're so vulnerable, these animals, at that first stage in life. Actually, white abalone and all abalone have a yolk from their mom in their egg, and they don't eat at all for the first week of life. They have to go through a complete metamorphosis and settlement with just the yolk from mom. And that means that if it takes them just a little bit more energy to create their shell in the first day or two of life, they're not going to make it through that metamorphosis. They only have a finite amount, and they can't compensate by, say, eating more. And so that's true for a lot of these invertebrates at their very early life history stages. They're really at the very brink of what they can withstand in terms of their metabolics. And one extra little stressor is generally too much. We also have some evidence that ocean acidification can affect older animals in terms of reproduction, behavior, things like that. But mostly the evidence we have right now is affecting those very early life history stages.
Other than human beings, what natural predators do abalone have?
So that's a great question. When we put abalone out, they are generally, we want them to be big enough that we can tag them and see them as divers, but not so big that we have to invest many years in them in captivity, right? So they are bite-sized morsels when we put them out into the ocean. Crabs, cabezon, sheephead, lobsters, octopus, lots of things. Otters is the one probably that most comes to mind, although for white abalone, they're deep enough that otters probably weren't eating them that much historically. Lots of things would love to eat these animals. And that's our biggest challenge with outplanting them, is trying to keep them safe from predators, at least for a little while. And one interesting thing is that when we do outplant them when they're about an inch or two long, they tend to go down into cracks and crevices. They don't become emergent or out on the rocks until they are much larger. And we know from outplanting activities for pinto abalone, another species of abalone in Puget Sound, that it often takes years to find the animals that are outplanted, which is good news, right? Because if we can't see them, the predators can't see them either. And the challenge of this is that funding agencies work in year-long cycles or 2-year-long cycles or so. People want to know right now, how many abalone that you outplanted in 2019 are still there? Right. And we're hoping we don't see them, right? It's going to be 5 or 10 years before we see them. So this is really a long game for this kind of operation, mostly because of that predation risk.
Can you RFID them?
So,
Can you tag them? Can you
We do.
tag
We
them?
tag them. We have these little tiny, they're called Floy tags. They're little plastic tags, and we use super glue to put them on the back of the shell. And they'd have letter and number and color combinations. So we know exactly who they are, who their parents were, where they've been their whole lives.
Is the range of abalone all the way up the west coast of North America?
Yes, there are abalone all the way up through Alaska and down into Baja. And again, on every continent except for Antarctica. White abalone in particular are a Southern California through Baja species. So they start at about Point Conception and go down into Baja.
So
go ahead, Brian, sorry.
Yeah, there's a big question like a lot of us don't like to talk about because we love to eat fish and we demand it. Is there a NOAA or somebody who publishes what fishes are like really reducing in population and we should kind of watch out for?
Yeah, so in terms of like fish that we like to eat, I really recommend Monterey Bay Aquarium Seafood Watch Program. They do a great job of figuring out, they actually have like these little cards that you can bring that are region specific, even you can put them in your wallet. And there's an app you can download for your phone for Seafood Watch. And you can just put in something that's on a menu and you can know what questions to ask. You know, so certain species are more sustainable if they're produced through aquaculture than harvested from the wild. For some species, it's the opposite. For some, if you get them through aquaculture in the US, they're green or okay to eat, but if they're through aquaculture through some other place, they're not. So it goes through all of those nuances and the questions that you can ask. But for abalone, for example, I highly recommend if you're going to eat protein that is animal protein, then abalone is actually a very sustainable protein to eat. So I would say that supporting our local abalone farms in California, there's the Cultured Abalone Farm in Goleta, there's the Monterey Abalone Company in Monterey, there's one called American Abalone in Davenport, which is near Santa Cruz, and they'll ship. So you can go to their websites and you can buy your abalone and get your fix that way.
Kristen, on your list of various labs, I did not see the Bolinas Marine Lab. Back in the 70s, when I was going to College of Marin, along with Patrick, we used to have a marine biology class that met at the Bolinas Marine Lab. Are they no longer active?
I don't believe they are.
I think it was actually part of UC Berkeley, but I don't remember.
Yeah, so
sure.
and that's actually UC Davis was as well.
Okay.
So in the 1940s and 50s, UC Berkeley started having marine science classes in Bolinas and also in Bodega Bay. They called the Bodega Bay lab the Foggy Bottom Lab because it was foggy. And it was right where Puerto Bodega is now. When was it? 1982, I think, is when UC Davis took over from Berkeley, a Bodega Marine Lab.
Thank you so much, Kristen, for your work, for your talk. Very interesting. And those were lovely slides, so visual. I'm glad that we can see them in that way and see you again after all this time. You might be happy to hear that we are going to honor you with a book that we have contributed to a local school that is oriented towards diversity, equity, and inclusion. And we'll endorse it with your name for having spoken with us today. We're so grateful for your time with us and look forward to learning more and following those references that you shared with us. But at this moment, let's have John Grech tell us a joke.
Well, all right, friends. As you know, I'm a history teacher, so we've got to go into the realm of history. As you know, history is very serious. People don't know enough of it, so I just thought I'd give you a little quiz. How was the Roman Empire cut in half? With a pair of Caesars.
There we go.
All right. Let's try one more. Ladies and gentlemen, how did Louis XIV feel after completing the very expensive Palace of Versailles? Baroque.
Well done.
And did you guys hear the one about the Liberty Bell? Yeah, it cracked me up too.
Yeah.
That's all I got.
Yeah, that was good. That was
too
perfect.
much.
Thank you. Not too much, just right. So, Bill Sauber, can you send us out?
Happy trails to you
until we meet again. Happy trails to you. Keep smiling until happy trails to you
Till
until we meet again.
Adios.